Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Frontline Conversation with LGW. I'm Doug Duncan, the President and CEO of Leadership Greater Washington. We are honored today to have Dr. Charlene Dukes with us, the President of Prince George's Community College, who's been a longtime leader in the region. And Charlene, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a delight to be with you all, and certainly with members of Living the Dream 2013.
I think we have a few members of your class on with us today, so that's great. So how are you doing personally? How are you feeling? How's life with COVID all around you?
Well, I think I'm probably feeling the same way that everyone else is, wishing that we were well beyond this, but we know in order to get there, we've got to go through it and figure out ways that we can keep our communities, our families, our friends, our neighbors safe from this dreaded disease. And at the same time, I worry because I worry about the almost 40,000 students whom we serve, and knowing that some significant percentage of them don't have access to technology or the internet to be able to engage in remote instruction. So as we think about the future and what that means for Prince George's Community College, we're thinking about how can we serve all of those who depend upon us for their initial foray or coming back into higher education.
So it looks like you're working from the office.
Yes, I am.
You go back home when this all started, or do you stay in the office, or how did that work?
Well, what I've done is when we actually pivoted on March the 16th in order to close the college down and begin to do some really focused training, professional development for our faculty and staff to understand what it would mean to be in a remote work posture, whether you were teaching or doing the operational work of the institution. I too pivoted and went home for probably about a month. But since that time, I've been coming into the office almost every day. We have staff who were essential, who had to stay here. Our college police are here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have facilities team members who are here, and payroll, shipping and receiving, printing and supplies, admissions and records. So we had a number of staff who came in several days a week. And for me, I will tell you that as I've grown up and had the opportunity to serve in a variety of leadership roles, I've always believed that leadership matters and that leadership by example is so important. So if we believe that all of these essential employees needed to come every day, even in the midst of a pandemic, then I believe that I needed to be here with them. So I actually have been coming to the office, again, like I said, every day for about 2.5, 3 months.
So are you running summer classes?
We did run summer classes. Our enrollment was actually up about 34%. All of those classes were remote, with the exception of a few. You know, we do offer some programs where students need to have hands-on experience in their labs or their clinical experiences. So the nursing program, respiratory therapy, radiation therapy, surgical technology, emergency medical technician, and a few more real estate licensure exams, so that we have been able to put in place a process and a protocol that will allow us to bring students and faculty on campus or at any one of our locations and make sure that we were doing everything that the CDC recommended and that the Prince George's County Health Department required. So masks, face coverings, gloves, hand sanitizing, and regular and frequent cleaning of spaces and facilities.
And what's your fall semester going to look like? Is it going to be remote?
Well, fall semester is going to be a little more of the same. We do have a return to a physical site plan, and we expect to move into the latter half of phase 2 fairly shortly, where there will be a few more people coming back to the college, probably at least 1 day a week. We expect to bring back about 25% of our workforce every day. So I explained it to the colleagues here at Prince George's Community College in this way. If you have 5 people in your department, each one of them will have to come in 1 day a week from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. But most of our classes will remain in remote mode, either in a synchronous format, asynchronous, or hybrid. And for those of you who are familiar, synchronous means if you registered for classes that began at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 12 noon, then your faculty member will join you in our online format at those exact times. If you're in an asynchronous course, which is fully remote, then the faculty member, excuse me, has put out a number of materials online. You can go in at your leisure, and then the faculty member sets up specific times to meet with you. And hybrid means that you will do a lot of work online, and you will come to the college when there is a need for the face-to-face experience.
Now, Dr. Dukes, the fall semester must be a little bittersweet for you since you are retiring in August after 25 years with Prince George's Community College. How did you arrive in Prince George's? Where'd you come from, and how did that work?
Well, I've had a long career in higher education, almost actually 42 years. So I was born and raised in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Some people may recognize that. We're pretty famous for 3 floods, 1898, 1936, and 1972. I will tell everyone that I actually was in the last flood, and I can recall just that heavy rain and how it rained all day and all night. And the next morning we woke up to disaster and pandemonium. But my career has been my professional career has always been in higher education as an administrator. I started out as a financial aid and admissions officer at the University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. I spent 2 years there, and then I moved to the Community College of Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, and I was assistant director of admissions, director of admissions, did some registrar work, did some financial aid work, director of minority affairs, and finally dean of students. And it was at a conference that I began to think about my own career trajectory and where I thought I could make a difference in what we would call a single institution. At CCAC, I worked at a 4-college kind of environment and happened to meet someone at a conference who was recruiting for vice president for student affairs at Prince George's Community College, talked to my husband, my family, and as either luck and preparation would have it, I arrived here in Prince George's County in 1995.
When you were moving to Prince George's County, did you have any apprehensions, any excitement, what were your thoughts as you're leaving Pennsylvania, coming to DC?
I'll be frank, I didn't know much about the county other than the research that I did in order to apply and feel as though I was reasonably, understanding of the position. It was only when I got to the county that I understood who and what Prince George's County is, and has the potential to continue to be. I think when I arrived, the first African-American or Black county executive had been elected, Wayne Curry. So it was clear that was exciting news, and it was clear that he had a vision for Prince George's County like no other, and that people of color could share in that vision. So that was exciting for me, and it was after I arrived that I began to find out a lot about who and what Prince George's County was, and the kind of pride that existed in a community that was becoming predominantly African American.
Well, I gotta say, my good friend Wayne K. Curry really did have a vision for Prince George's County, and he worked very hard to implement that. We miss him every day. He was
every day, absolutely every day.
Great leader for Prince George's County. Really set, I think, the county in a new direction. So you came in at the beginning of all that, and then you were elevated to president of the college, and you've been the president for 13 years. What has changed what has changed in your 42 years in working in higher ed?
Well, the first thing I'll tell you, if I could go back and give you all just a little hint of what I really did not know. Living in Pennsylvania, and actually in Pittsburgh, if you lived in the suburbs, when you wanted to go downtown, you went into the city, which was Pittsburgh. It was all in the same state, all in the same area, geographical region. So after my family and I had been here for some time, and we actually moved here during the weekend of the Million Man March. Many of you may remember that. And my husband, my son, my brothers, nephews, and friends came down and stayed with us. You know, we had pallets all over the house as they went to participate in the march. And probably a few weeks later, someone asked me, had I been downtown? And I said to them, I've been trying to find downtown Bowie, but I can't find it. And little did I realize that I had to leave the state of Maryland to actually go into the District of Columbia to be downtown. So that either tells you how parochial the geographic region where I come from is, or just that I had no idea. But you know, as I think about education over the course of these 42 years, there are some things that strike me as a real need to change, and there are other things where I know that change is coming. So I'll tell you a little bit about my background, because hopefully that'll help you understand why I see things the way that I do. I am from a large family. I have 8 brothers and sisters, and I'm the second oldest. And what I tell folks all the time is that I grew up in a 4-room house. Most people on the call with us today may have heard this story before, but for me, it really, I hope, gives everyone a flavor as to why I am the way that I am, why I have the values that I have. So a 4-room house meant that we had a living room, a kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. My parents had one, the 9 of us had the other. So actually, 3 of my 5 brothers slept in the top bunk bed, 2 slept in the bottom. My 3 sisters and I slept maybe 3 or 4 feet apart in a double bed, where 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. So it was when I went to college that I realized that I would have, even though I had to share it with a roommate, I would have my own bed for the very first time in my entire life, that I could roll over and I was not going to touch anyone. I was only going to touch the wall if I rolled over far enough. The other thing that happened with us is that probably when I was in the 9th grade or so, because we carried lunch to school every day, but in the 9th grade, we were given these red lunch tickets. And I didn't understand why some people had a lunch ticket that was a different color. And when I said something to the counselor, what they said to me is, based upon your family income, you are determined to be eligible for free and reduced meals. I will tell you that almost every day I cried when I went home, because I asked my mother, could we just take lunch to school and not stand in line and have to hand over that red lunch ticket where people looked at you as though you were taking something from the mouths of other folks. So that was a very telling moment for me to understand that I was perceived as low income, and we had never missed a meal. My mother was a stay-at-home mom for the most part in our lives. So we had breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. And then to feel as though we were less than. So one of the things that was always important to me, no matter where I worked, I saw students as I see myself. Someone who is looking to create better opportunity and better lives for their families and their communities. So wherever I have been, my commitment to students has been the first and the only thing for me. That's the value that I have, and that we all work at these institutions because we see value in the students who come to us. And so my experience as both a young person in elementary, middle, and high school, and then certainly in college, where I went to a predominantly white institution. And I would say that those were not the best experiences for me. We could be on this call forever, Doug, if I were to talk to you about the kind of racism that we faced every day in those institutions. And so now I think it's incumbent upon us. We are at a tipping point in our history. And if we don't take the opportunity to ensure that this movement ends up positively, then I would say shame on us as Americans, and certainly shame on us as the United States of America.
So how has your life story, the way you grew up, the empathy you have for your students, how have the righteous unrest that I call it, the protests around the world, how has that affected you?
Well, you know, I think, and as I said, it's a tipping point. You know, if we think about the last generations of students, they have experienced things that none of us have really experienced to the extent that they have, whether it was 9/11, whether it's been all the school shootings, and certainly the relentless killing and brutal murders of people of color. And I think that what I've said yesterday, I had the opportunity to speak on a program, that the people I see today are what I call the 21st century freedom riders, that they have had tipping points that say that things have to change, and we have to be the change that we are looking for. And that for those of us who might be just a little bit older, who grew up in different generations, that what we have to do is one of two things. We either have to move out of the way, or we have to join these hundreds of thousands of people who are saying that Black Lives Matter, that racial injustice to anyone is injustice everywhere. And there are so many things that I think that we have the potential to do and to be. And I think that there's even a role for Leadership Greater Washington in all of that.
So I was struck recently by a story I read about a Black female doctor who wears her scrubs everywhere she goes now, because she said she's treated differently in her doctor's scrubs, that if she's dressed normally, she gets followed by security guards in stores, she gets stopped by police for no reason, and that she has to try to show this image of professionalism so that the authorities will treat her as a person. I mean, is that some of the things that you've gone through in your professional career?
Oh, absolutely. I would say that there sometimes, depending on who I'm standing next to, the assumption is that if the person is white, the assumption is that that person is the president. So even, you know, with everything that I've been able to contribute, that there is sometimes privilege that is afforded to someone just because of the color of their skin.
So what are some of the things you think we should do? What should LGW be doing in these times?
Well, I think that there's an opportunity to hear the voices of the members of Leadership Greater Washington, and where they or their companies stand on this matter of social justice. I think that there's an opportunity to be to take the limelight in some cases, and in other cases to partner with others, because I think, you know, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And I think that as we think about what's happening in the jurisdictions that are represented, the regional sort of jurisdictions that are represented by the members of Leadership Greater Washington, where can we lean in to make a difference? Where can we lean in? Because you know what I think about from 2013? I think about the awesome individuals that I met, that maybe had it not been for Leadership Greater Washington, I never would have had the chance to engage with them. I also think about the values that leadership and the principles that Leadership Greater Washington talked to us about. And I would also believe that, that as you looked at our applications, that we were selected because you saw a synergy there. And the synergy that I see is that we recognize that we are one people with different tones of complexion, but that what we want to do is we want to see a better life for everyone. And where can LGW lean in order to make that happen, or to be a part of the dialogue, the discussion, and the action?
Well, clearly one of the ways LGW is trying to do some of that is through these frontline conversations like the one we're having with you today. And we started off these conversations really dealing with COVID and what's the response, and what are you seeing on the street, and how are you dealing with it? And it very quickly shifted to the whole righteous unrest and the protests around the country because of the demand for racial equity, the demand for racial justice that we saw. And I do think that George Floyd's murder really was that tipping point you're talking about, and you've talked about. And it's just the thought of the police officer with the knee on the neck, just looking at a camera saying, I know you're watching me, I know you're videotaping me, but I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing this. And it just, the disregard for human life was just extraordinary there. And now it has grown into a worldwide movement, I think. And I hope you're right. I hope that we don't just let this opportunity pass us by. And I think we're seeing some things where people are saying, let's do the right thing here. Let's make some changes. I mean, who would ever thought that Dan Snyder would announce he's not going to name the Washington Redskins that name anymore? I mean, that's a blessing all in its own. So.
And I will say to you, what was profound for me is that my 8 brothers and sisters and I all attended predominantly white institutions. For those of us who went to college, one of my brothers went immediately into the service, the Army, and one of my sisters married almost immediately after high school. And I will say to you, given what our experiences have been, that we all sent our children to historically Black colleges and universities because we thought it was so important that they understood who they were, who they are, the value they have, and what they can contribute to this world. That was very important. Even in my entire education, from kindergarten through a doctorate, I have never been in a classroom with a faculty member of color. And that is something I did not want to happen for my child. And it's all because of where I grew up, where I made a decision to attend college. Now, I will say that there are plenty of people who helped me, who supported me, that I also recognize that I didn't go through this journey alone. But at the same time, I wanted something different for my son. So he is a Howard University graduate. He is confident in who he is and what he brings to the table. And I see that with all of my nieces and nephews, 2 or 3 of whom went to Howard, Elizabeth City State University, Virginia State, Langston University. So I could go on and on and on. But the level of confidence that I see in them, when I was their age, I questioned myself all the time.
So do you see the students going to HBCUs as gaining much more leadership ability through those years there, as opposed to going to a predominantly white university?
I think that what I saw for Maurice, and I think if he were on this call with me today, is what he saw were people who cared about him, who were willing to share who they were, and who were willing to tell him the story of people of color who helped to build this country, who helped to build this nation, whose humanity was stripped from them, and that what HBCUs did for him was to give it back to him. And that was critically important for me, that every night, and I can't tell you how you worry about your children. Maurice, make sure when an officer pulls you over, you immediately put your hands on the steering wheel. You don't reach for anything. You say, yes, sir, and no, sir. You look them in the eye. You don't challenge, because the important thing is to come home, and then we'll deal with whatever indignities that you believe that you faced or were confronted with. But there are mothers all over our community who could tell you that we have, just as their fathers do, that we have those opportunities to tell our children how important it is to come home.
You seem to have said a magic word in this conversation, which is Howard. We're getting so many shout outs to HU in the chat. It's unbelievable. So it's great to see. Howard is a wonderful university.
Oh, absolutely. I will tell you all too that when he was a freshman, I lived my entire HBCU experience through Maurice. I was over there almost every day for everything. So,
do you have all the HU paraphernalia? Are you?
oh, absolutely. His classmates feel like my classmates. They call me Mama Dukes. Absolutely.
Yeah, Charlene, that's wonderful. That's wonderful that you've gotten such a great experience out of Howard and other universities for your family. Let's talk about the future of higher ed.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot of people saying that, and Mahan Tavakoli, our chair, is always talking about this, about the failure rate of some private universities and colleges is going to increase dramatically because students aren't showing up. They're not going to get the level of students that they can't afford it anymore. Where do you see us in the next 5-10 years in terms of the state of higher education in the United States?
Well, I believe that in terms of delivery of higher education, that's going to have the potential to change. That as we move more and more into this remote sort of environment in which we find ourselves, that clearly I don't believe that that's going away. I do believe that, you know, even as a vaccine is sought for the coronavirus, that we are going to have to learn in some ways to live with this and what does it mean. But I also see some other things that says that before we believe that we can fully go down these fully remote kinds of environments, we have to think about what young people don't have. So I would believe that none of us would be surprised to understand that there are many people who don't have technology in their homes. They don't have a computer, they don't have a laptop, they don't have an iPad, they don't have a device that allows them to fully participate in a remote environment. Even if you have a cell phone, depending on the kind of cell phone that you have, the screen is so small that you can't fully participate. The other thing is that they don't have Wi-Fi. So how do we begin to think from a public policy perspective that maybe Wi-Fi needs to become a public utility so that people can afford it? Right now, it's privilege that allows you to afford Wi-Fi. And how do we think about that? I think it's also about how do we connect higher education, not just to the workforce, but to the kind of values that we want, the kind of civic engagement, the understanding of a democracy, not Democrats, but a democracy. And what does that mean? And where do you learn and understand how you work in teams, how you think critically, how you communicate critically? I think that those are values, at least from my perspective, that will always be there in higher education. The question becomes, how do you deliver it in a format where probably a significant portion of individuals are just that their lives and the way they learn is just not conducive to that format. Most of us are used to face-to-face classes, and there's a reason for that. We all have different learning styles. Some people can just soar significantly in an online environment. And we know that there are many people over the course of these past couple of months across institutions, 2-year, 4-year, public, private, who have just struggled with it. So what are we learning in such a way that we can make education, particularly higher education, more accessible, more affordable, and more readily adaptive to the style of learning that students can engage in successfully? And I believe that we have people who are thinking about this work and doing this work, and we can learn from them.
Now, community colleges in particular, during my years in Montgomery County, Montgomery College grew tremendously during the time I was there. And we're seeing now people, it's sort of a national conversation about should we make community college tuition free for everyone? And where do you see community colleges going in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, what I will say to you is that at Prince George's, and before I do that, Dr. Pollard, Darian Pollard, is such a close friend and colleague. And I remember talking to her and encouraging her to come to Montgomery College. So I would say that what we have to do is figure out where is the best value for our students. And, you know, there are those who say if it's free, that people don't value it as much. And I would disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Here in Prince George's County, we created the Prince George's County Promise Scholarship Program under the leadership of the former county executive, Rushern Baker. And today, we have more than 400 students who are engaged and fully engaged, and we are covering the cost for their tuition, fees, and in some cases, books. They are getting their associate degrees. They are probably averaging somewhere around a 3.1 grade point average, and they're transferring to some of the finest colleges and universities across the region and across the country. And it all is about how you wrap your arms around students. I had a young lady come in the office and I asked her what I could do for her. And she looked at me and she said, "You probably think that I'm coming in here to ask you for a scholarship or I need some money for books." And she said, "I'm just coming in here to say, all I need is for someone to care about me, that I can do the work as long as I know I'm coming to a place where people care that I'm here." And that's what I think that we need to do. We need to show the people that we say we believe in every day and that we exist for, that we actually care.
Well, I'm not looking to start a controversy here, but Vakisha Fripp from your class, Dr. Fripp, just put on the chat, Fisk forever. So, and that you should not retire. So we're getting a lot of those comments as well about you should.
She and I will have an offline discussion about that comment.
So you are retiring in August from the college, but you are not retiring from Prince George's County. You are co-chair of a task force looking at the future of Prince George's County. What's the name of the task force?
Yes, so I did allow the county executive to talk me into it. Angela Brooks, also a member of Leadership Greater Washington, and who's doing a phenomenal job here in the county. Her commitment is just unbelievable to the residents of the county and certainly to the work that we need to be doing as part of a region. But it is Prince George's Forward, a task force comprised of now probably, it seems like almost 200 individuals. And our work is simple yet complex. We are looking at 5 areas: health, education, human and social services, economics, and government operations, to say what will the better normal be for Prince George's County and Prince George's County residents as we move out of COVID-19 in the way that we know it today, but still be able to provide excellent service, to be thinking about economic development, how we take care of those who have need of human and social services, what it means relative to the delivery of education. So our co-chairs are Dr. Joe Wright, who co-chairs the health subcommittee. He's the chief medical officer for Capital Region Health. Dr. Darrell Pines chairs the education subcommittee. He is the newly minted president of the University of Maryland College Park. Rosie Allen Herring, also Leadership Greater Washington, chairs Human and Social Services. Tom Graham chairs Economic Recovery, and the former Governor Martin O'Malley is chairing Government Operations. So we put together a stellar group of leaders, and they are certainly supported by a number of community members who sit on each of those committees. And we're thinking innovation and transformation. Those are the 2 words that we are focused on: innovation, transformation. Next is sustainability. And then lastly, of course, is making sure that we have the financial resources and the partnerships to make all of the recommendations that we will present to the county executive actionable.
You know, earlier in our conversation today, you mentioned that you couldn't find downtown Bowie. And I will say that is one thing I've noticed over the years, working very closely with Wayne Curry, Howard Stone, and others, that's something that Prince George's County has lacked. These town centers that are so critical to Montgomery County, whether it's Rockville, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Gaithersburg, Germantown, Wheaton, you name it. We've got these town centers where people can congregate. And we really haven't had much of that in Prince George's County. Partly that's to blame for that, is that you didn't have the development around the metro stations that you're now getting. And I was very encouraged under Sherman Baker, where he had a lot of projects that he was working on. The new medical hospital, the new First American Medical System Center, which is going to change healthcare, I think, the whole system of healthcare in Prince George's County. He had the MGM Grand casino hotel operation. He had the FBI headquarters, which I still hope at some point comes to Prince George's County. But all of those were sort of separate projects, and when they were done, it's where do we go from here? What's the underlying industry tying all of this together? And I do think that I know Councilmember Derek Leon Davis has talked about making sort of Largo the new sort of, instead of Upper Marlboro, making Largo the new county administrative center and concentrating county services there, trying to help create that sort of downtown community there. In my experience, that has been so critical to the life of the community. People living in a neighborhood, they want a good high school and they want a good town center that they can go to and send their kids to.
And I think that we're seeing successes with all of that. And what we have to do is continue the trajectory as county executives change, it's just like as presidents change. I imagine that the ninth president of Prince George's Community College will bring some of her own thoughts and perspectives and views. And at the same time, she'll work really hard to continue the good work that has been going on for some time at the college under my predecessor and certainly under his. So that I believe that as things move forward, we have to understand that we always have to be thinking about the future, but we don't necessarily have to throw away any plans that have been on the table as we think about the ways in which we move forward. I think also we know that we have lots of land in Prince George's County, and that we have, a rural tier, this sort of suburban tier, and what we're trying to create around urban tiers, and that we have to recognize how do we comfortably coexist, in and around and about all of that. So I see that we have the world, as they say, is our oyster, and all we have to do is open it and recognize Prince George's County for the pearl that it is, and just continue the work. Everyone builds upon the work of the person who came before them. And I think that that's the case in this piece of our conversation together too.
Yeah, I agree with that. You've got a great foundation, a great base there to build on. I think it's a great time in the region's development for Prince George's to step forward. Montgomery County really has slipped quite a bit in terms of economic growth, economic activity. Prince George's has added more jobs than Montgomery County has for several years now. So I think there's a real opportunity to sell Prince George's County to the greater economic marketplace as a way to help grow that tax base, help you pay for your schools, help you pay, as you said, have that economic infrastructure there to help cover the needs of the community. Absolutely.
And I think the other thing is, one of the the college's vision statement certainly is to be a partner in this regional delivery of higher education. But in our mission statement, there was something very critical we put in that statement, and it was at the recommendation of our Board of Trustees. And it was not to just be focused on delivering education, but it also to deliver education in such a way that it resulted in economic equity for the students who come to our institution, which means that the salaries that they make are commensurate with the work that they're doing. And that for whatever reason, that we need to ensure that they are not left behind, because it also is about that. How do we ensure that people can make a living that gives them a life where they can be productive and give back to our communities?
We've got a question for Robert Malone, who's talking about the larger corporations all seem to go to Arlington or Fairfax counties in Northern Virginia. They're not coming to Montgomery or Prince George's. What does that say about the Maryland side, and why is the capture rate so low for us here? And do you think race has a role to play in that, or had a role to play in that?
Well, I think that there are probably a couple of things, and these are, so let me be clear, These are the personal opinions of Charlene Dukes. But I think it's how welcoming is Maryland, just as a state. And I know that, and we all are very much aware that Virginia has been very welcoming to new businesses and corporations. I think the other thing is how well are we communicating with our neighbors, the residents of Prince George's County, about what the long-term possibilities have to be when we're approached by business and industry to come in. I think that that's critically important. How do we socialize our friends, our neighbors, the residents to what the potential has to be? It may only look like this right now, but here's what the plan is, and here's how we've signed the dotted line on those plans. I think that in many ways it probably has been about race, but I believe that we have the opportunity to overcome that. We can't talk about being one of the wealthiest communities in the communities of color in the country and not be able to overcome that, because the other thing I know is that we have some of the brightest minds in terms of innovation, whether it's around technology, healthcare, education, social services, or the like. So we can do this. I am just absolutely convinced that we can. And what I hope is that what comes out of this report, and it's my goal to make it so, is that we will have a set of recommendations that again support innovation and transformation, and they are actionable and we can deliver on them.
One thing I've learned is that economic development doesn't just happen. You got to work at it. You got to work at it hard. You got to keep working at it as long as you can to make things pay off. And I'll just give you one little story of when we were rebuilding downtown Silver Spring. Mm-hmm. Troubles we had getting retailers to come in to downtown Silver Spring, because they would walk around and see this is a different community. It's not Potomac, it's not Chevy Chase. It's a different kind of community with different kinds of people. And there's a reluctance there. I remember talking to Wayne Curry at the time of, gee, you know, it's that tough for us in Silver Spring. I can't imagine what it's like for you in Prince George's County, trying to get some of these businesses to come in and just look at you with an open eye. You can talk to your blue in the face about how you've got the financial resources, you've got the income levels there to support it. But what they do is they look at the income levels of Potomac and say, well, you're not Potomac. Well, of course we're not, but we're still. Well,
I think they look at
high in the country. So.
Mm-hmm. I think they don't just look at the income levels. I think they look at the color of skin, and absolutely. I think that's why I keep saying that we're at a tipping point. If people really believe, if companies are pushing letters to, you indicated earlier, Dan Snyder and the Washington football team, would we be at this point if it were not about people coming to a realization that the ways in which we have been behaving is wrong? I think the same thing is true as we talk about business and economic growth and development, that let's have people everyone has written letters about just how sorry we are, how appalling it is. We are with you. Then I say, if you're with us, then come on over here and show it. That's the way that I look at things. If we're really together, if you are truly an ally, because I understand that an ally is something stronger than a supporter, then now is the time to show that. So think about the next business or industry that wants to move into the Washington, D.C. region. What is it that we need to do to say Prince George's County is a good place to go?
So you're right. We do have to get better. We do have to just not say things, but do things. And hopefully we'll have learned our lesson, and hopefully we'll see this change around the country. It's going to be very tough to do police reform. We've seen cities try that across the country and with varying degrees of success. It's going to be very tough to change the criminal justice system, but I think these things obviously have to be done to create a more just society for all of us. Let me switch to are there any leadership lessons you've learned over the past few months through the COVID and unrest experience?
Well, I think that there are some things that I've learned that have been reaffirming and reinforcing, and that is to listen. That sometimes what you need to do, or an idea will come from the most unlikeliest of places. And I always said, here and other places I've been, just because we carry the title of vice president or senior, whatever it is, that doesn't mean that we're the smartest people in the room, because most of the time we're the furthest away from what I call the day-to-day work. So how are we learning from people who are doing this work every day? And where we could do better, where we could serve better, where we could have better outcomes. So I also have learned that not to shy away from talking about things that can be difficult, that can be emotional, and that can be raw. Because it is in higher education where we are to have the freedom to discuss and think through these things and come back with some viable solutions. I've also learned that when I am thinking through things and reading, that is work. You know, that it's not always that you have to be out on the speaking circuit or people have to see you actually doing something, that when you are thinking about what's next and how you get there, that it's work. And I would say, lastly, for me, I believe that we've been able to do a lot of things at Prince George's Community College because I never thought about the money first. I thought about the idea and what it had the potential to do. And then we went after the money because there was something that we could lay in front of the county executive or the county council or partner organizations, both for-profit and not-for-profit, to say, come in and let's lead this work together. So absolutely, I've probably over 42 years, I've learned so much. Now, my brothers and sisters would tell you that my powers to delegate have not gone away. But as the second oldest, my brother and I had to make sure that all the chores were done, that everyone was where he or she were supposed to be at any given time. So that is something that we still do today. We delegate a lot or tell our siblings what they should be doing. And then I'll as we end, I don't know what our time is, Doug. I'm assuming that you've been keeping track of time. I'll just share with you that we have a family motto. And that motto is one for all and all for one. From the time that we were toddlers, my parents would stand in the bedroom door. We would recite the Lord's Prayer. And then my dad would say, what's the family motto? One for all for one. That's what we would repeat. It's a motto that we hold dear to this day. And my dad passed away now probably about 6 or 7 years ago. And that's a motto I hold for Prince George's Community College and Prince George's County, that in order for us to work through all of these things, we have to be one for all and all for one.
Charlene, now I know why you've been so successful at Prince George's and throughout your life. The one for all for one, the concept of what do we need to do for our students, for our constituents, for our customers, for whatever, and then we'll find a way to do it.
Absolutely.
I think too many people afraid to come up with big, bold ideas because they're worried about the cost. Well, let's figure out what we need to do, what's going to make life better, and then we'll find a way to make it happen. And that's the only way you're going to get real change in this world. And I love your comment about listening. We've heard from a lot of the people we've had Frontline Conversations with as we've gone virtual. Mm-hmm. They've had to spend more time. They have to be more conscious of how the people they work with are doing personally. And that makes them listen a lot better and more than they had before. So that's a great lesson for all of us. Do you have any one for all is a great final word, but any good news stories and any LGW members who have helped you out during these past few months?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I could name everyone who's probably on the call and those who aren't. You know, I would say that my good LGW buddies are, and it should be no surprise, Artist Hampshire Cowan, Rosie Allen Herring, Howard Stone. You know, we try to be those who come together in ways and think through things. You know, Rob Malone, I could name a number of Sherm Ragland. I could name a number of people from Prince George's County, but also, you know, when I met Pinky, it was just so amazing to me. I had never met her before, but she was exactly as folks had described her to me. Just giving and caring and reaching out. I've just been so impressed with the leadership, and I could not go anywhere. Montez Anderson And I would always tell him in our Leadership Greater Washington classes that the facilitators would say that we were ending, and Montez always had a last question. And I would send him a note and say, Montez, under no circumstances do you ask a question today. We are tired and ready to go. And he never disappointed me because he asked a question. And well, listen, Vakisha, I know, is on the call, and many people don't know, we discovered in Leadership Greater Washington that we are related. We are cousins, and had no idea. No idea. So it also gave me the opportunity to meet some real family, and then to consider all 67 or so of our classmates as family, because they have made sure to stay in touch with me while I have not necessarily been as, good at staying in touch with them.
Well, I will say, based on the chat box, the chat room, Rob Malone is your biggest fan. He has been chatting the whole time you've been talking with nothing but praise you, as
Yes.
have many of your classmates. So, Dr. Dukes, thank you so much. It's been great. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for your leadership at Prince George's Community College. Thank you in advance for your leadership in Prince George's County, making it a better place for all of us, therefore making the region a better place for all of us.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to seeing you many more times in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone.